Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The whole House can be proud of the UK's vaccination programme, with over 22.5 million people now having received their first dose across the UK. We can also be proud of the support the UK has given to the international COVID response, including the £548 million we've donated to COVAX. I therefore wish to correct the suggestion from the European Council President that the UK has blocked vaccine exports. Let me be clear, we have not blocked the export of a single COVID-19 vaccine or vaccine components. This pandemic has put us all on the same side in the battle for global health. We oppose vaccine nationalism in all its forms. I trust that all sides of the House will join me in rejecting this suggestion and calling on all our partners to work together to tackle this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues in others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Let's go to Daisy Cooper. Daisy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is throwing a staggering £37 billion at a test and trace system that we know has made barely any difference, but yet it says that it cannot afford to give more than a pitiful 1% pay rise to NHS workers. The Prime Minister has said that he owes his life to them. He stood on the steps of Number 10 and applauded them. So will the Prime Minister do more than pay lip service and pay them the wage that they deserve?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she is indeed right that we owe a huge amount to our nurses, an incalculable debt, and that's why I'm proud that we've delivered a 12.8% increase in the starting salary of nurses and are asking the Public Pay Review Body to look at increasing their pay, exceptionally of all the professions in the public sector. As for test and trace, Mr. Speaker, it is thanks to NHS Test and Trace that we're able to send kids back to school and begin cautiously and irreversibly to reopen our economy and restart our lives.
Let's go to Gagan Mahindra. Gagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited Long Marston, Bovingdon, Rickmansworth and Berkhamsted to see the damage that flooding caused to our communities firsthand. Can the Prime Minister assure this House that as the weather gets better, we do not lose the momentum of finding long-term sustainable solutions to prevent flooding in the future and to give residents the security they deserve all year round, irrespective of the weather outside?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for what he's doing to campaign for his local area for flood defences. I want to thank the Environment Agency for their tireless and imaginative and creative work that they do to find solutions, and we're investing £5.2 billion to build 2,000 new flood defences over the next 6 years.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Who does the Prime Minister think deserves a pay rise more? An NHS nurse or Dominic Cummings?
Mr. Speaker, as I told the honourable lady for the Liberal Democrats earlier on, we owe a massive debt as a society, and I personally, to the nurses of our NHS. And that's why we've asked the Public Sector Pay Review Body exceptionally to look at their pay. I want to stress, however, as the House knows, that starting salaries for nurses have gone up by 12.8% over the last 3 years, and it is thanks to the package that this government has put in place that we now have 10,600 more nurses in our NHS, Mr. Speaker, than there were 1 year ago, and 60,000 more in training.
Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, he says nurses' pay has gone up. I know he's desperate to distance himself from the Conservatives' record over the last decade. As he well knows, since 2010, nurses' pay has fallen in real terms by more than £800. And he didn't answer my question. It was a very simple question. He's been talking about affordability. He could afford to give Dominic Cummings a 40% pay rise. He could afford that. Now he's asking NHS nurses to take a real-term pay cut. How on earth does he justify that?
Mr. Speaker, as I repeat the point that I have made, I believe that we all owe a massive debt to our nurses, indeed all our healthcare workers and our social care workers. And one of the things that they tell me when I go to hospitals, Mr. Speaker, as I know the Right Honourable Gentleman does, is that in addition to pay, one of their top concerns is to have more colleagues on the wards to help them with the undoubted stress and strains of the pandemic, and that's why we provided another £5,000 in bursaries for nurses, another £3,000 to help them with particular costs of training and with childcare, Mr. Speaker. And it's because of that package that this year, I believe, we're seeing another 34% increase in applications for nurses, and we are on target. This government of this party of the NHS is on target to deliver 50,000 more nurses in our NHS, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about recruitment. There are currently 40,000 nursing vacancies, 40,000 and 7,000 doctors' vacancies. How on earth does he think a pay cut is going to help solve that? And frankly, I'd take the Prime Minister a bit more seriously if he hadn't spent £2.6 million of taxpayers' money on a Downing Street TV studio or £200,000 on new wallpaper for his flat. Mr. Speaker, they say charity starts at home, but I think the Prime Minister's taking a bit too literally. Let me try something very simple. Does the Prime Minister accept that NHS staff will be hundreds of pounds worse off a year because of last week's budget?
No, Mr. Speaker, because, and of course we will look at what the independent peer review body has to say exceptionally about the nursing profession, whom we particularly value. But what he should also know, and which he should reflect to the House, is that under this government we not only began by a record increase in NHS funding over, I think, £33.9 billion, but because of the pandemic, we put another £63 billion into supporting our NHS, Mr. Speaker, on top of the £140 billion of in-year spending. And it's because of this government that in 1 year alone, Mr. Speaker, there are another 49,000 people working in our NHS. And that, I think, is something that is of massive benefit, not just to patients, but to hard-pressed nurses as well.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, my mum was a nurse. My sister was a nurse. My wife works in the NHS. I know what it means to work for the NHS. When I clapped for carers, I meant it. He clapped for carers, then he shut the door in their face at the first opportunity. And the more you look at the Prime Minister's decision, the worse it gets. Because it's not just a pay cut, it's a broken promise too. Time and time again, he said that the NHS wouldn't pay the price for this pandemic. 2 years ago, he made a promise to the NHS. Here in black and white, his document, it commits to a minimum pay rise of 2.1%. It's been budgeted for and now it's being taken away. He shakes his head. His MPs voted for it. So why, after everything the NHS has done for us, is he now breaking promise after promise?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he voted against the document in question, which is to crown the absurdity of his point. Under this government, we have massively increased funding for our amazing NHS, with the result, as I say, there are 6,500 more doctors this year than there were last year, 18,000 more healthcare workers and 10,600 more nurses. And we're going to go on, Mr. Speaker, and we are going to deliver our promises. I can tell the Right Honourable Gentleman. We are going to go on and we're going to build 40 more hospitals, and we're going to recruit 50,000 more nurses, and we're going to get on and deliver on our pledges to the British people. And we're going to do that because of our sound management of the economy and the fastest vaccine rollout programme of any comparable country, which, frankly, if we'd followed his precepts and his ideas, we would certainly not have been able to achieve.
He says he voted for it, he did. And now he's ripped it up. 2.1% ripped up. And if the Prime Minister won't listen to me, he should listen to what his own Conservative MPs are saying about this. His own side. This is what they say. Behind you, Prime Minister, it's inept. It's unacceptable. It's pathetic. These are Conservative MPs about the Prime Minister's pay cut for nurses. And that's before his answers today. Another of MPs said this, Mr. Speaker, and this is perhaps the most telling of all the comments. This MP said, sitting behind him, the public just hear 1% and they think how mean we are. Mr. Speaker, even his own MPs know he's got this wrong. Why is he going ahead with it?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what the public know is that we're increasing starting pay for nurses by 12.8% over the last 3 years. They know that this government, in the last year, has put another £5,000 bursary into the pockets of nurses because we support them, and as well as the 3,000 extra for training. And of course, it's very, very important that the public sector pay review body should come back with its proposals, and we will, of course, study them. But as I say, it is thanks to the investment made by this government that there are 49,000 more people in the NHS this year than last year, 10,600 more nurses helping to relieve the burden on our hard-pressed nurses. That is what this government is investing in.
Keir Starmer.
Speaker, he says, we support them, we'll reward them. He's cutting their pay. Mr. Speaker, not true, he says. Not true. Prime Minister, a 1% rise versus 1.7% inflation rise. That is a real terms cut. And if the Prime Minister doesn't understand that, we really are in trouble. Mr. Speaker, they promised honesty, but the truth is they can afford to give Dominic Cummings a 40% pay rise, and they can't afford to reward the NHS properly. The mask really is slipping, and we can see what the Conservative Party now stands for. Cutting pay for nurses, putting taxes up on families. He's had the opportunity to change course, but he's refused. So if he's so determined to cut NHS pay, we at least show some courage and put it to a vote in this Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, the last time we put it to a vote, he voted against it. As I said before, we're increasing pay for nurses. We're massively increasing our investment in the NHS. We are steering a steady course, whereas he weaves and wobbles from one week to the next, Mr. Speaker. One week he's attacking us, saying we should be doing more testing. The next week he's denouncing us for spending money on testing. One week he calls for us for a faster rollout of PP. The next week he's saying we spent too much, Mr. Speaker. He's got to make his mind. One week he calls for a faster vaccination rollout when he actually voted, though he claims to have forgotten it, to stay in the European Medicines Agency. Perhaps he'd like to confirm that he voted to stay in the European Medicines Agency, Mr. Speaker, which would have made that vaccine rollout impossible. We vaccinate, we get on with delivering for the people of this country. We vaccinate, he vacillates, Mr. Speaker, and that's the difference.